Okay, is the network important to architecture? Well, I think when you address the network, it's kind of like addressing is culture and is the way we live important to architecture. I think that the network has had an incredibly important influence on the way that we act and the way we socialize.
I think the network is important to architecture because as we see with cell phones and computers nowadays, since we got the cell phone, we can't give it up. It's with us all the time, so I suspect that the day that we get the network into architecture, it'll become more and more part of architecture.
We've been spending more and more of our time engaged in this digital network culture. It has created a complete cultural shift with how we relate to our environment. We are now more engaged with this digital culture and connecting with one another through an interface versus actually engaging with people in a physical environment.
It's affected everything, and I think that it's important that architecture at least attempts to address these changes in society. And so I think it's applicable specifically to the network, not just because it's something kind of new and interesting, but because it's really prevalent in the way we live.
I think we like to spend most of our time engaged with our screen versus the physical space due to the fact that it's more interesting to us. We've been spending most of our time engaged in non-places such as freeways, supermarkets, those sort of spaces which are more of a pass-through space, which creates this passive interaction with our physical environment versus spaces that are actually interesting and engaging to us.
I think it's interesting in this time period because architecture has long been seen as this kind of top-down mass media approach, but we're entering a time where this plethora of bottom-up ad hoc creative potential is kind of invigorated by the network. So it puts into question the role of not only the architect, but the role of architecture in general, where you're no longer maybe imposing a singular agenda or a singular authorship on a project, but there is a potential to kind of activate this newly discovered bottom-up authorship of the public.
Another reason we like spending time in this network is due to the fact that we have this intimate relationship with the screen. On Facebook, we can post anything, images, text, ideas, and we can get this immediate response and feedback from other people, whether they like it or comment it on it, and I think we enjoy having that personal gain and satisfaction from this interaction.
The network, I think, is idealized as this kind of euphoric, simplified kind of cloud but I think in general it's more of this scrappy, overlaid combination of systems that, for the most part don't make sense, and you kind of stumble your way through it. But I think that's also the most exciting parts are when you get these kind of scrappy overlays of different authors, of remixes. It's a difficult notion because it addresses this kind of gray line between where the architecture kind of stops and the possibilities begin, designing for the situation or the potentials, which I think is a struggle that has been really thought through for a long time and continues today. I still think that struggle is important and even more relevant than ever before.
One of the ways that architecture could engage the network is by utilizing the ideas of the ways we find interesting and engaging in the network and translating them into physical reality.
I think the network can influence architecture by enhancing the experience. I mean, we have Skype where we can connect with people nowadays, but it's only through a window. I mean, what if an entire wall became, a screen?
Typically, we're used to having spaces that are designed for a specific program function, and when it's not being utilized for that, it's just an empty space. Where now, with the fact that everything is, the network is so portable, we're able to bring it with us anywhere, and we're able to instantly create a space that is more engaging and interesting to us, regardless of the actual space that we're in.
I think architecture does need to be rethought in its approach to, this new wave of thinking. I think that architecture as a framework is an interesting idea. It's not a new idea by any means, but it's also an important one that I think needs to continually be explored because In the end, I think architecture is, in its most basic sense, really framing these activities and these environments and providing potentials for its inhabitants and for its programs.
Our experiences with other people in remote locations will be brought into our homes or our spaces in a way that is more seamless than it is right now. In the case of the 21st century, I think augmented reality will be more useful and be a mode for conveying information.
In a way, architecture is moving towards, or potentially moving towards a way where the inhabitant is more of an activator or an engager in space versus a kind of consumer of the agenda of the architect.
And I believe when we move towards that direction where architecture becomes more flexible and more almost atomized in that way, but atomized in a way where it's flexible, then the network can truly become more integrated into architecture.
And so I see it less as about really displaying information and more of a way of taking this information that is an incredibly important part of your life and the way you live, but translating that into a more environmental, ephemeral way.
Architecture is all about fixed relationships, whereas the digital network is all about emergent experiences.
When we see movies, I think those are good representations of what we dream of for the future. Like in WALL-E, we see the computer and the network just totally taking care of people, managing their lives, and to the point where people don't have to do anything. But I don't necessarily think that that's the way of the future.
I think that architecture starts to lose its relevance once it starts to disregard contemporary culture, and I think that the network again is an incredibly important part of that. And I don't know if I see the idea of the master architect or the master designer really playing or the brand name really playing as important of a role in a world, I mean, filled with creative potential and kind of bottom-up authorship. It's not about the technology per se or the specifics of the way you integrate the technology. I think it's mostly that idea of disregarding the general social shifts as a whole.